Junji Ito. Good shit. Really hits that spectacle horror note. You know, that inescapable kind of horror that can't be reconciled or reasoned with, and the protagonists are mostly just inconsequential to the story. Although, you start reading some of the stories focusing around like Tomie, and it hits that note in a much different manner, wherein the inescapable horror is the protagonist and... Look, we don't have to do this. We don't. See that red X up there? You can click on it and all this goes away. We get on with our day and nobody gets hurt. It's quite simple, really. You'll burn more calories just in the act of sitting in a chair. We don't have to go through all of this. We can all sleep well tonight. We can go out, play with our dogs, pet our kitties, or my favorite, gorge ourselves on raw fish. All and never once be troubled. All you have to do is walk away. Never let this memory torment you. Never look back. Never wonder what you missed with the full knowledge that only hell awaited. All you have to do is click that X. You motherfucker. Mad Mind Studios promised us blood. Guts. Tits. Motherfucking lesbos. The most horrifying depictions of hell ever attempted in a video game. Oh no. Ew!
She and her succubs.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Succubs.
Did you maybe want to try a retake?
Succubs.
You're gonna stick with that, aren't you?
Succubs.
Please no. Mad Mind Studio. Crowdfunded. Agony. Just do the game intro. Agony is not what I would describe as a beautiful train wreck, mostly because that little comparison doesn't do justice to what the developers implemented into the game. Agony is Goya and Da Vinci rising from the dead and putting on a show of all their works. During said show, they constantly wave hotel bedsheets in front of each work, constantly flipping off and on a blacklight, all the while the cheat is throwing a light switch rave. There's a hell of a lot to see, and a great deal of it is worth seeing. The major portion of it, however, is obscured by the implementation of insanely bad ideas, broken mechanics, and absolutely indolent pacing. Starting with the story, the game is overall incoherent. You are Nimrod, or Amraphel, or, look it up, Kush. You want to build a tower to piss in God's eye because you're a man after my own heart. Shit doesn't go so well and you manage to hook up with a primeval hooker, and suddenly you're in hell, and that's where our little game starts. What follows is a mess of following the nippleless wonder as she guides us through a long list of objectives that all fall into the categories of open door and go here. End of list. That list of objectives, mind you, stays on the pause screen after they are completed and will eventually grow long enough that it's obscured by your profile name. Not only do objectives you completed hours ago stick around for the entirety of the game, they will persist even after you've started up succubus mode. Bad design on that part. The telling of the story is contrived and convoluted. It's mostly told through notes and letters scattered throughout the game that give you absolutely zero insight as to what you are doing or even why. You simply meander through the game because the Red Goddess told you to, and when you get to the places she wants you to go, she gives you some moronic speech about how you'll do what she wants, when she wants, and how she wants you to do, but also how she's going to do everything she can to stop you. Seems counterintuitive. Anyhow, a succubus regularly attempts to goad you onward, and it's a little more than annoying. The base ending to our sordid little tale culminates in you getting a behemoth whom BT dubs is not Satan to break down the gates of hell and storm those of heaven. Ishtar, Ereshkigal, ancient fertility goddess, etc. grants you your life back just in time for said monstrosity to stomp you to death. End game. Hey, check out Succubus mode. There are 6 more endings, 3 of which culminate into each other, one of which is just a goofy side ending that requires the defeat of an optional boss, and the rest are just confusing wastes of time. There is some humor to be found in the evil ending, but it's less of a joke and more of an acknowledgement that the devs aren't taking themselves too seriously, which is a breath of fresh air. The 3 ending story arc is a bit refreshing, but it's a tedious slog to unlock. Every now and again you'll engage in dialogue scenes in which you can generally ask the person you're conversing with one of 2 questions. Regardless of what you ask, however, you're given a completely unsatisfying answer that is just as inconsequential as everything else, and really just ends up being a gigantic waste of time. Time flows differently in Lordran, and thus, a heinous mess is all I can really describe the story as, and it's one that is told in a way that overall makes the mess of a story entirely inconsequential. The gameplay is just as much of a janky and undesirable mess as the story is. Walking Simulator doesn't even begin to describe. It's more like a geriatric shuffle simulator. Vast tracts of land stretch out before thee, and you traverse them at a pace that makes people infected with polio tell you to hurry the fuck up. You're given a sprint option, but it's very short, takes a long time to regenerate, and thanks to the janky unpolished design, tends to not like activating. Should you die in any way other than falling off a cliff, and you will enter soul mode, where you must then find a damned martyr or demon to possess, assuming you've unlocked the ability to possess said demons. Unfortunately, it's also a broke dick mess. You see, there's an option for easy possessions. The reason for that is because when attempting to possess someone or something, an anchor point is set up. The target then has to, move near said anchor point, otherwise the possession will fail. The problem with this is the anchor point can be 6 inches from them and they'll just shuffle in a circle for 10 minutes or worse, walk away for absolutely no discernible reason. Easy possessions not only removes this problem, but just kind of goes to show that the only difficulty derived from the game is from the devs exploiting how broken and incomplete it is. If they were smart, they would have made all possessions easy and just pretended they never tried to make them difficult in the first place, as even after you manage to fight the janky mechanics to possess a demon, you're then still on an insanely short time limit if it's not a story-based one. Torches are important to the story for burning down shit in your path, on the path to the collectathon secret shit, or for just seeing random shit, or for chucking to distract a demon that wants to take a bite out of crime. The latter use of which doesn't seem to want to work half the time. The worst the game gets mechanically seems to be in places like the forest, where the passability of foliage is not only questionable, but also entirely inconsistent. Foliage that you can duck under or simply step over just for when a demon shows up and you need to go back the other way suddenly blocks you with an invisible wall because now you're not hitting it at the exact perfect angle, making me question whether or not I was supposed to be able to get through there in the first place. And that situation is pretty much littered throughout the entire game. Small steps that have to be jumped over but require a specific angle to hit. Tiny, insignificant foliage suddenly turning into an invisible wall. Invisible walls actually popping up out of nowhere. Getting stuck in level geometry because of said foliage requiring you to reload. Getting stuck in wall because you got locked in soul mode. Getting stuck in place in soul mode. Getting stuck in a wall because I decided to kill something when playing in succubus mode. And we don't end there mechanically. This game doesn't seem to know how to load or save. Every time I had to sit through a loading screen, I would get an XMB message saying that my save data is corrupt. This message would also pop up occasionally when trying to save. Sometimes it would pop up in the middle of me playing, lock my controls, force me to walk off a cliff, and have to sit through another loading screen after having just sat through one. Being an independent title, I should be a little lenient to technical issues. But Madmine lists on their website that they are made up of AAA veterans. So they're getting a frowny face sticker all the same, especially after I have to sit through a loading screen, turn directly to my right, and suddenly the game has to load again. After you've completed the heinous, broken trudge that is the story, you get succubus mode, in which you play as the aforementioned creature who has been goading you on. We're offered the ability to happily murder and climb walls. Happily murdering is absolutely glorious to behold, but climbing is just that lovely Uncharted style of being able to climb on the yellow things when the devs allow you to, and this mode is where killing something tends to get you stuck in the level geometry. Aside from access to Kickstarter thank you rooms, all it really offers is one of the endings and new areas to complete the abhorrent collectathon. It was a chance for them to flip the game on its head and create 2 distinct experiences out of the one, but they fail to even make an attempt at that mark. Presentation overall is fantastic, but still manages to go through a level of suffering that is legendary. Even in hell. Titanic corpses littering the landscape, chopped up with parts used for brick and mortar, rivers of blood and castles of flesh, forests of writhing bodies and the tortured used as decoration. Absolutely beautiful skyboxes of incongruent geometry and scale, all harkening back to the older artistic depictions of hell. Many enemies, mostly the Onoskellies, have a great level of attention to detail and variety. But even all that gets a nice kick in the crotch. Large portions of the game are entirely blacked out, leaving you fumbling in darkness. Yes, even during the collectathon portions of play, which puts even more necessity onto the torch. Glowing pinks and blues also litter the game, creating a hideous juxtaposition that takes me out of it entirely. I should also mention, of course, that the Day 1 patch broke these glowing textures, causing them to turn into a bright fuchsia fog that completely broke the game. And I still managed to get through that early game maze, despite, on top of darkness ruining all the work they put in alongside glowing gel pen explosions, they like to cover objects in this translucent texture that makes it appear wet and reflect light, but only serves to, oddly enough, make everything look like it's covered in glitter, even in pitch black sections. Those enemies I mentioned earlier, they also suffer pretty heavily. Onoskellies look utterly fantastic with that attention to detail I mentioned, but Chorts kind of look like an original Xbox model failed to load properly. And then they have these hand spiders that use a very odd condensed swarm of bees texture that also looks broken. Corpse Katamari are still just as silly as they were in Dark Souls 3, and the optional Baphomet boss looks like it could actually be pretty terrifying, but is overall missing some of that detail and final polish to really drive its design home. It just appears unfinished. The Souls of the Damned are also a gigantic, confusing mess, many of which resembling more oral models that have been stretched out. The silliness not being nearly ready to end, men are allowed to rock out with their cock out, but the souls of damned women have hilarious little red X's painted on their crotches. Their suffering isn't even really all that grotesque. Impaled bodies will be cleaner than a Christian rocker's record, and they're just kind of littered about everywhere. Attempts to disturb the player via the implementation of infants is actually turned pretty hilarious, with the heads that are larger than the rest of the body and emitting these hilarious little shrieks, and the horrible demon woman you're chasing the entire game has no nipples, oddly enough. Naked the entire time, but no nipples.
Is anyone you know missing any nipples?
I'm sure I've stated that before, but a game designed to be one where the most horrific depictions of hell in a game to date has all these weird little quirks that make no sense, and worse, becomes humorous. Damned women ain't got no crotches, but succubus do, I think? You never really get a good look, even though they love throwing little orgies at you every chance they get. All of that simply put, it's a game that spends far too much time getting in its own way and showing off how much work is put into many segments, while putting a huge emphasis on how little work was put into even more segments. The heinous little glitter texture is damn near omnipresent for half the game, and once you hit segments where it and the bad lighting are removed, you can see how truly beautiful the game is, and you're left asking yourself, why the hell they thought most of this was a good idea. Agony is a mess. The story is meaningless, convoluted, and contrived. It bears no semblance of coherency and only feels inconsequential. Gameplay is tedious, broken, and gets in the way of everything, including itself. Artistic directions are beautifully designed, and they spend so much time with poor atmospheric decisions that it makes it all entirely tiresome. The depiction of hell should be terrifying. It should be something beautiful and abhorrent to behold. I should be intrigued but not want to gaze upon it. Mad Mind Studio accomplishes this, but for absolutely zero of the right reasons. There's a lot worthwhile in this game. It's all just locked behind tedious slogs, bad lighting, worse texture work, bad voice acting, worse voice cues which try to load 3 different tracks at once, broken level geometry, broken saving and loading, all making it a Herculean effort just to find something worthwhile in the game. Blood and tits galore! But God help you trying to enjoy any of it. I'm the TheNecroswanson, and you can go fuck yourselves.